Good morning. Good morning. Welcome back to Hot Mess Life Coach. This is episode 9, and I am your host, Brian Hogan, a hot mess and a life coach, if that's possible and allowed, which I think it is, because forget about culture and rules and etiquette and all those good things. And let's just be who we are, people. Let's just be who we are. So here I am, Hot Mess Life Coach, coming at you with episode number 9. Hello, Instagram. Hello, Facebook. Hello, Twitter. Hello, folks on LinkedIn or YouTube. Or if I'm speaking into the void, hello, void. And if you're listening to this later from the future on a podcast or on one of those networks, then welcome to you as well. This is me time traveling. So hello to all of you. What I want to talk about today is soulful living, what it means to live from the soul. And, you know, the soul is an interesting concept. It gets to an existential place. Like, what's the soul? What's the difference between the soul and the spirit? Is there a soul? And in some ways, I mean this colloquially, like soulful, meaning like with purpose, with meaning, like with chutzpah, with fun, with joie de vivre, like to live soulfully in that sense. But I also mean it mystically in the sense that when we take care of the invisible, ineffable aspect of who we are, that religions and sacred traditions call the soul, we end up having more meaningful, purposeful lives. And what we can do is learn how to listen to the yearnings of our soul and transform our lives to be more soulful, both in terms of the colloquial definition of fun and invigorating, and the mystical definition of purposeful and meaningful and in line with our true nature and the deep yearnings we have as people who are alive, as creatures who exist on this beautiful spinning blue planet. So what is soul? Soul is something hard to pin down, isn't it? We don't have proof for it anywhere. Quantum weirdness of quantum entanglement and the wave particle paradox. It's what Einstein called spooky action at a distance. I mean, this is Einstein we're talking about, like genius 10 times over. And his term for quantum physics and quantum entanglement in particular was spooky action at a distance. So even he didn't really have a scientific way to quantify what this spooky action is. But this spooky action would be more easily explained if there was an invisible dimension to life that we have not yet found a way to prove, a soulful dimension. Neuroscience, with all of its focus on the nervous system and mapping the brain and EEGs and MRIs, it still has yet to discover how the why and the how of many of the phenomenon of thinking. I mean, why do we think? Where does consciousness come from? Why are we able to wonder? I wonder that. I wonder why we can wonder. Why are we able to forget? Why can we remember? Why are we here? These are existential questions, not answerable by even the most degree-laden neuroscientists out there. Robert Lanza did give the old college try, though. He's an American scientist, and he attempted a scientific explanation that accounts for the soul in his theory that's called biocentrism. In this theory, he considers that life and biology are essential to our being, to reality, and to the cosmos. In fact, the key takeaway from biocentrism is this affirmation, that consciousness creates the universe and not the other way around. What this means, if it's true, is that the world around us is created by our consciousness rather than containing our consciousness, which is how it seems on the face of it. But a lot of things are different than how they seem. You know, we talked in previous episodes about how separation is an illusion, and yet everything seems separate. But the more you look deeply at it, the more you realize how intrinsically linked we all are, and everything is embedded in one fabric called reality, called existence, called the universe. And so things aren't always what they seem. And so what if it's true that consciousness creates the universe instead of consciousness being something contained by the universe? What if it's true? Exploring Your Mind put out an article in 2019 that discusses it like this. They say the current scientific paradigm doesn't usually recognize the spiritual dimension. Rather, it points out that there's no need for a soul. In fact, it tends to explain life through equations about the activity of carbon and the activity of proteins, things like that. On one hand, religion gives the answer to the existence of the soul from a spiritual point of view. It associates it with the transcendent and with the incorporeal and with the ineffable, like the ineffable, the indescribable side of life. On the other hand, science, the know-it-all science, materialistic, grounded in truth worldview, associates it with the material, if it even conceives of it at all. So in other words, science understands it as the mind, and science also reduces it to this concept of cognition and consciousness. At least from a poetic standpoint, it's a little bit different, and yet religion sees it as this broader thing, encompassing the transcendent and the indescribable side of life. So there isn't even agreement between science and spirituality. That's nothing new. They've been in disagreement for millennia, and only now are we starting to see where mystical and spiritual truths are being validated by scientific evidence in spades, like the scientific evidence to suggest that we can heal our bodies through creating a positive state of being inside of us. Now, that doesn't mean that if you end up with an illness, it's your fault. That's a very reductive way of looking at it. That's injecting blame into a scenario where blame need not be. We can get illnesses for all kinds of reasons. There's germs, there's viruses, there's, heredity, all kinds of things. But we are learning that genetics play a much smaller role than things like mood and perception and positive outlook. And if we can harness the power of those things, we actually can do a lot of healing. I mean, there's the one study that I think a lot of people know about this at this point, where patients in hospital rooms where they had a view of the surroundings would heal faster and better and more long lasting than patients in a hospital room that had a view of like an exterior wall or no view at all. So just that small piece of evidence shows us that by changing our outlook, that by giving us the ability to perceive wider and more expansively, we can change our lives and we can heal. Soulful living is about living more fully and deliberately from that expansive place. So, Hot Mess Life Coach is a show for people that are trying to get it together while the world seems to fall apart. And what we're going to do today is talk about how we can use soulful living to help put ourselves back together even more deliberately and more fully. In Plato's Apology, which was written over 2,000 years ago, he writes this: "I do nothing other than urge young and old to care not just for their persons and property, but more so for the well-being of their souls." The word for soul in the original Greek, if you didn't know, is psyche, as in the prefix for psychology, psychiatry, and psychotherapy. So soul actually means psyche. And so the word for care that Plato often used is therapia, which is where we get our word therapy. So soul care is another way of saying psychotherapy, or rather psychotherapy is another way of saying soul care. In our worldview right now, in this cultural context in which we live, in which mental illness is like a new hot take and a hot topic, psychotherapy is seen as caring for the mind, caring for the emotions. But what if we added the dimension of caring for the soul? And what is the difference between caring for the mind and caring for the emotions and caring for the soul? Well, that's a great question. I'm glad I asked. So caring for the mind and caring for the emotions is about problem solving. Okay, I have an emotion and I want to figure out how to change it. I have thoughts and I want to figure out how to change them. Caring for the soul, rather than being about problem solving, is about honoring where one is in the present moment. The soul is the deeper yearnings, the deeper longings that exist always, and they need us just to see them, just to honor them, just to touch them and care for them. So in some strange ways, psychotherapy's true meaning is to care for our souls, which brings me to Thomas More, who is a monk and a psychotherapist. And I'm reading his book right now called Care of the Soul, Psychotherapy. And his take on the soul is marvelous and groundbreaking, at least for me. He describes caring for the soul as being very challenging, because to care for the soul means to follow the internal pullings deep in your true nature. And if you've built a life based on culture, embarking on a life of caring for your soul may first cause you a lot of upheaval before it brings with it the inevitable fulfillment of living within your true nature. Because culture might have caused you to build up a life that you don't truly want. And your mind thinks you want it because your mind is believing culture's lies. That's not a judgment. We all believe in culture's lies. Culture is pervasive in our culture, and the rules that go along with it are almost invisible to us, like a fish swimming in water. Culture is the water in which we swim. Fish don't say, oh, this water is so wet today. It's just their environment. The same way culture is our environment. And so we swim in it. And so we buy into the thing of, like, let's go get a good job. Let's go get a degree. Let's get the 2.5 kids and the golden retriever and all that stuff. And for some people, that's fine because that is in alignment with their soul. But for many of us, maybe even for the majority of us, it is not in alignment with our soul because that's just one way. That's just one method of how to live on the planet. And there are 7 billion or more methods because there are 7 billion or more of us. And we're all unique, wholly and completely and soulfully unique. So following the yearning of your soul is countercultural. Culture tells us to follow certain rigid rules and expectations. Girls have to like dolls. Boys have to like trucks. Straight people have to like sports, and gay people have to like unicorns and rainbows. Well, I'm gay, and rainbow is the very symbol of solidarity in my community. And I happen to think rainbows are boring as crap. Not real rainbows. Those are majestic and magical, and I'll stare at those for hours, actually. But rainbow flags, rainbow stickers, rainbow cake, ugh, I don't want any of that crap. Please, no, God, no. Boring. But I'm not supposed to say that because, gasp, I'm not supporting the queer community if I say that. But that's nonsense because the queer community is much bigger than rainbows. Way bigger than rainbows. Rainbows are a symbol, a mere symbol. And if it doesn't resonate with you, toss it out. Just like any other cultural rule. If I pretend to like rainbows when I really don't like them, my soul dies a little bit inside. That's true for all of us every time we pretend anything. Every time we put on a social mask for the sake of politeness or for the sake of other people's expectations, we're doing that at the expense of our soul. So that's the thing with the soul. It won't force you to listen to it, but it won't stop whispering what it wants either. If you ignore it, you could make a great life that checks all of the boxes that I mentioned. Good job, good relationships, exact right amount of fractional kids and the dog. But if you created that stuff because you were supposed to, or because society taught you to, or because of family pressure, or any other kind of need for external validation, whether you knew it or not, you were committing soul murder. Well, attempted soul murder, because the soul can't actually die, in my opinion. But still, attempted soul murder is just as much of a crime, especially if it's premeditated. For most of us, it's not premeditated. It's second or third degree soul murder or soul slaughter. Maybe it's even a misdemeanor. But we keep trying to do that in spite of ourselves, because living from a soulful place takes courage, takes this countercultural idea that I'm going to be relentlessly, uniquely, fully myself, despite how that looks to you, despite whether you like it or not. And in a world of cancel culture and constant shaming, it's actually even harder and harder and harder for us to embody soulful living. But it's also needed now more than ever, because the old ways of doing things have got us into the cultural societal mess that we are in. What's going to get us out of this cultural and societal mess is living from our soulful place. I truly believe that. Soul is not a thing, but a quality or a dimension of experiencing life and ourselves. It has to do with depth, with value, with relatedness, with heart and personal substance. So I'm going to share with you Thomas More's 5 principles for more soulful living. And then after those 5 principles, I'm going to share with you a story where I was committing attempted soul murder for over and over and over again without learning my lesson for a long time, and finally figured out how to knock that crap off and start living from a more soulful place. Hot Mess Life Coach exists because of me trying to live from a more soulful place, to be honest. So we can transform our lives slowly but surely when we honor the yearnings of our soul. But it's not easy. It is simple, but it's not easy. And so here are the principles from Thomas More about how to embrace soulful living. Okay, principle 1, serve the soul, and there's 5 of these. Serve the soul rather than the surface needs in your life. You know if you're doing this based on whether you have symptoms. So if your soul is suffering neglect, you might feel depressed or anxious, or your relationships might be hurting. We have to start to learn the difference between caring for our souls and managing our lives. Self-care, what in the mental health community is being called self-care now, is not necessarily the same as soulful living. Self-care might be very practical, like, okay, I need to take a break from work because I've been hearing about traumas all day, or I need to go on a vacation because I'm getting near the edge of burnout. That's fine, but that's not soulful living. It can be. It's not mutually exclusive with soulful living. Self-care and soulful living can coexist. They can exist concurrently, but soulful living has this other dimension, this depth dimension, this meaning dimension to it. So managing our lives comes with duty. It comes with pressure. It comes with obligation. And oftentimes it comes with like a sense of repetitiveness. And if we're managing a life that was built by culture and it really is not in alignment with our true selves at all, then this repetitiveness can even come with an existential dread or like a feeling of doom. So soul care, on the other hand, brings with it an expansive sense of freedom, of joy, of risk, of daring, of adventure. If you're not feeling those things, at least semi-regularly, you are stuck on the surface needs of your life, because the surface needs will always be there and they will always need tending to. And there's never going to be a good time to go have an adventure. But adventures are not vacations. Adventures are journeys you embark on where things are expected to go wrong, but you have a blast learning from the things that go wrong. Vacations are where you expect everything to go right, and when they don't go wrong, you're really freaking pissed about it. And then you miss the fact that it was an adventure that you could have been on. So, court adventure. What is your soul saying to you right now when you think of the idea of adventure? What is it saying to you? After this podcast, Google that thing a little bit. Just tiptoe towards the adventure. No one's asking you to upend your whole life right now, because the soul is also very gentle and the soul doesn't mind if you move slowly. So we'll get into that in a minute, but the soul is freedom, it's expansiveness, it's risky, it's joyful, and it wants you to have adventures. Principle 2, your symptoms are the raw material for your soul making. So before I said you can tell if you're living soulfully or not based on whether you have symptoms, like any kind of symptoms. A symptom is like in any area of least satisfaction, as we call it in the coaching world. So your symptoms are the raw material for your soul making. This is a countercultural way of being also in the world, because it asks us to use our symptoms to our advantage rather than to try to fix them, get rid of them, move them away, conquer them, overcome them, all of those heroic, pressury parts of language. So if you have emotional problems, don't do the cultural thing and just automatically try to exile them out of your life. But by looking at our emotions closely, we can get a sense of what our soul needs. Emotions are a form of soul guidance. As Thomas More says, he puts it this way: symptoms are painful and in need of tending and refining, but they contain the essence of what you are looking for. Within each emotion is a clue as to what your soul is looking for more of or less of. So he had this woman, a client that came into his office, and she was like, help me get rid of my dependence. And instead of just following along with that, because he doesn't see himself as a psychotherapist, he's not like an exterminator of parts of people's lives, that's how he put it. He helped her, he asked open-ended questions to elicit from her what was it about dependence that made her feel uncomfortable. And what they discovered was that she had this false belief that independence was healthy and dependence was unhealthy. And what she came to realize was that there was a certain kind of dependence, the interdependence among families, the interdependence among a workforce or among a community, that is actually healthy. And so when she was able to drop her limiting belief about defensive dependence being unhealthy, she was able to tend to her soul's need for dependence in a healthy way, instead of trying to eradicate her feelings of dependence, which would in a sense have been a move against the soul. So her soul was communicating something to her in these feelings of dependence, and because she so wanted to be rid of the feelings of dependence, she was missing the message, which was there's a healthy way to depend. And you want to learn that healthy way rather than being so all or nothing about dependence or independence, success or failure. So principle 3, don't be literal, be poetic and look deeper. So this is a principle about soulful living, right? So for example, if you drink too much, what is your soul looking for in the alcohol? If you eat too much, what part of your soul is in need of nourishing? These are metaphorical, poetic linkages you can make. You want to think poetically. And again, just like principle 1, don't respond from the surface level. For example, for me, I don't typically have a sweet tooth. Like I like sweet beverages, here's my double chai latte, whatever thing. But I don't really have a sweet tooth for food at all. Like I'd rather have 2 pieces of lasagna than any dessert. That's been true for me my whole life. But lately, in the past few months, I've been eating more sugar and kind of craving sugar. So I sat with this and I even got some coaching around it. And what I realized is that I was not allowing enough sweetness into my life. And like I'm in a grad program, I'm in some other certification programs. I just started learning 2 new martial arts, and those are all enjoyable things for sure. Like I love them. They're things that I'm interested in. But they all involve learning and skills training and practicing and studying in a way and skills acquisition. And with all of those new things I took on, I squeezed out the room I used to have for pleasure reading and bowling and other sort of time wasting activities, which my soul needs. My soul yearns for that stuff at times. And so when I thought poetically about my sugar craving, what I came to realize is that I need to add things back into my schedule that my soul finds sweet, not just things it finds fascinating, but things specifically that it finds sweet. So this is what it means to not take things literally, but to look for the symbolism underneath your current problems. This is soulful. Principle number 4, take time for reflection and conversation. So this is what I was alluding to a few minutes ago about going slow with this stuff. You don't necessarily need to be so quick to make decisions and go into action-taking mode when you've hit on a soul desire. So this is not about being passive either, but it's about being contemplative, thoughtful, and deliberate. The soul's yearnings are subtle. So it is in stillness, not haste, that we can get a clear reading on what the soul is actually telling us. Words have the power to heal us. So you journal about your intuitions, about what you believe the soul's guidance is telling you. And then you contemplate it. Does it resonate with a part deep inside you? That's the beauty of getting it out into the journal. You take what you think is the soul's guidance, you put it in the journal, and then you run that back through the filter of soul guidance and say, does it resonate? Because remember, the soul's guidance may come with a bit of fear, because it might be asking you to do something that goes against the life that you built up. Because it's going against something that was not put in place by your true nature. But that's okay. The soul doesn't demand that you upend your life. You can start small. You start with contemplation only, and then you take small steps. In coaching, we have a tool we use with clients called turtle steps, which we explain is basically baby steps divided into 1,000. So once you figured out a baby step, you divide that baby step into 1,000 other steps, and each one of those is a turtle step. So maybe the first turtle step is like looking at journals online, and the second turtle step is ordering the journal. The third turtle step is putting it near your nightstand. The fourth turtle step is opening to page 1 and writing, I am going to start journaling soon. So you just get super slow, and you make a turtle step, a deliberate and intentional turtle step, and you take that one each day. But the way that you know that you've landed on a turtle step is that when you think about taking that step, the reaction inside of you is like, oh, that's ridiculously easy. Of course I could do that. And then you do it. If the step is any bigger than that, where it feels like, oh, this is a step, then you've got to divide that step by 1,000. Divide it until you get one that's ridiculously easy to take, and take that step. As you take more and more turtle steps, slowly, one a day, finally your life starts to look transformed. Fear is not the guidepost for moving forward, because fear will always be present. So the guidepost is whether your new guidance feels like freedom or not, even in spite of the fear. Soulful living feels like living in a place of liberation and freedom. Okay, the final principle is principle number 5. Seek counsel from trusted soul family. So you want to consider that the interpretation of your soul guidance may be filtered for you by your own cultural filters, by your traumas, by your triggers, by your wounds. So finding someone you trust who has no agenda other than your highest good is key. If your soul guidance is telling you to quit your job, then your coworker who doesn't want to lose their gossip buddy is probably not the soul family that you want to be going to for this second point of view. If you're thinking of moving across the country, then your parents who will miss you are likely not the best choice for an alternate point of view. For this other point of view, you have to choose a person with no competing agenda other than to help you hear the truth of your soul. This can be a good friend, this can be a coach, this can be a therapist, this can be an astrologer or a bartender. It doesn't really matter, just as long as they have no competing interest and they're a good, willing listener. So those are the 5 principles of soulful living. And so I just want to give as an example, this is a story of me when I was committing soul murder before the pandemic. So I was bartending basically for years instead of pursuing my dreams of screenwriting and directing. And I did this again after finishing my master's degree when I stayed in an administration job that I didn't really enjoy because I was too afraid to take the leap into the unknown without financial security. So the pandemic was this second big awakening for me where I realized I love more than one thing. Like I had spent my whole life, I'm going to just work on becoming an actor, screenwriter, director. And I had this false notion that I had to do side gigs that weren't right for me because they were the kind that I could leave after the end of the shift. And if I could leave it at the end of the shift, then I could compartmentalize that and I could spend the rest of my free time working on my creative endeavors. But that backfired because when I was doing these jobs I didn't like, even though it was part-time and even though it was good money, I had to spend the free time when I wasn't doing the job recovering from hating doing the job. And so it actually ended up sapping my creativity. And so that was an example of soul murder because every time I clocked in at the bartending job or in the last year of the administration job, when I went there, I just knew that I was like violating my sense of self. I knew I was not listening to the sweetness of my soul's yearning, but instead I was, taking out my murder weapon. And so you really want to admit to yourself where you are making decisions that are not satisfying you. I did not have to do side gigs that I didn't like, but I didn't know that. And so I reevaluated during the pandemic. I ended up having a furlough. I had a whole bunch of time to myself. And I came up with this new thought that arose from my soul, which was life coaching, because Martha Beck is probably one of the world's most famous life coaches, like Oprah's life coach. And she was an instrumental part of my spiritual awakening back in 2010. So in 2020, I was like, what is she up to? And I found out she does a life coach training school. Awesome. And I was like, my soul wants to sign up for that. I'm doing that. And I got hundreds of hours of coaching. I gave hundreds of hours of coaching. And I realized that I wanted to have a life coaching practice that I could do part-time that would be meaningful, fulfilling, and impactful while I still work on my creative endeavors of screenwriting, making short movies. And I make short movies at least once a year. And I'm writing multiple screenplays now with writing partners that we're actively out there trying to get shopped. If any of you are an agent or a manager or a publisher, take note. Next big thing right here. But the point is, I didn't have to do a soul crushing job in order to pursue my soul fulfilling creative dreams. I could do a soul fulfilling side job and a soul fulfilling dumb luck adventure pursuit, which is what my Hollywood dreams are. So I quit my day job as an administrator finally, and I entered a counseling program. So I'm taking my life coaching skills to the next level there. And as soon as I quit the administration job, I got a promotion to becoming an artist in residence at that university. I got a job as an associate faculty at another university. Within a few months, I was teaching classes at the Trumbull Senior Center. I love teaching just as much as I love life coaching. And so now I have a life coaching practice, and I make my living from that and from teaching. And I use all the rest of my free time when I'm not studying in the grad program to pursue my dreams of acting, directing, and screenwriting. So all of this basically set me up to have this new life because I followed the yearnings of my soul. And I'm not saying that to brag. This took time. It's years in the making. Like this journey started for me in 2020. It's now 2022, and I'll be finished with my grad program in 2024 and fully set up for this new lifestyle. So this is a years-long pursuit that I'm in. So there's no need to rush. We don't need to rush, but we just need to follow the nudges of our soul, follow the yearnings of our soul, and take the smallest little steps every time toward those dreams becoming a reality. So now, I'm not saying to go quit your job necessarily, but I'm not saying don't quit your job. You totally can quit your job. What I'm saying is find out what your soul is guiding you to do by tuning into it. using these 5 principles that I outlined earlier, and then slowly, bravely, gently move turtle step by turtle step in the direction of more countercultural, soulful living, and watch your life transform. Okay, well, that is what I have for you today. Thank you all for tuning in right now or from the future. And if you're watching this later, I just want you all to know I'm so grateful for you, and I'm so thankful to have all of you here listening to this. If you know of anyone who might benefit from watching or listening to what you just heard, then please share this video, tag them, like it, tweet it, link it, whatever you know how to do to it on social media to get it out there. And if you want to learn more about me and what I do, then you can visit my website at thebrianhogan.com. And you can apply for coaching there, or you can just read some of my spoken word about my existential musings on life. And until then, I will see you all next week at 10:30 a.m. Eastern for episode 10. So be hot, be messy, and be blessed. All my love to all of you. Thank you so much.